I've said it time and time again, but Christmas is definitely the holiday with the most horror movies centered around it. Classics like Black Christmas, which got no sequels but two very different remakes, Gremlins and Christmas Evil, gave way to modern classics like Better Watch Out, Krampus, and Terrifier 3. Then you have the one series that decided to make a whole interconnected universe out of the holiday. With 5 movies that sometimes, rarely, kinda connect with each other, and with 4 of them out of the way, it's finally time to look at the last entry in the series before the quasi-remake came out in 2012. I've had the pleasure to discuss 1, 3, and 4 in one way or the other on the channel, and Part 5 deserves its flowers too. While 2 is an awfully good movie, 3 to 5 can all count as black sheep, and 5 especially has its weird moments both in front of and behind the camera. Time to check to see if the kids' presents are magically produced killers as we discuss Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toy Maker. As I said, this would be the last in the series until the remake, and it was released during the height of straight-to-video production in 1991. This was the third straight in the series that went that route after the second made next to nothing in theaters. While Part 3 was a mishmash of production and distribution, Parts 4 and 5 had 2 through lines in live entertainment releasing the movies, and Brian Yuzna being heavily involved. In Part 4, that involvement was director and story credit, and Part 5 being screenplay co-author. Boy, did he give us a story. Yuzna is a name that most of us recognize, but few probably realize how prolific he's been in producing, writing, and directing. Society, the Reanimator series, Return of the Living Dead Part 3, Dolls, Suitable Flesh, and the Dentist series have all had his hand one way or the other. I did say co-author of the screenplay though, and his partner in crime for this particular project was Martin Katrosser. Katrosser has had a ridiculous career as script supervisor on every Tarantino movie, as well as for movies from James Gunn and Eli Roth. As a director, this is his first of only 4, but his screenwriting credits also include Friday the 13th Parts 3 and 5, 2 of my absolute favorites. The movie itself is actually a bunch of ideas sewn together. It's a retelling of Pinocchio, a Lifetime movie about a dad coming back to meet his son, a Santa slasher of sorts, and has weird multiverse implications for the rest of the series. The boys over at the Movie Dumpster did a near 3-hour podcast video on it a few years ago, and they were right when they said Yuzna pulled a bunch of scripts he had just lying around, painted a Christmas setting into the canvas, and unleashed this madness with a reported $250K budget onto the world at large. At times, it's genuinely fun, really bad, so bad it's good, and everything in between. The cast isn't much to talk about except for one very oddly shaped elephant in the room, and that's Mickey Rooney as Joe Petto. Yes, that's Joe Petto as in Geppetto from Pinocchio. You'd think that's the funniest thing about his involvement in this movie, but somehow it isn't. The funniest thing, and my favorite thing, is that when the first movie came out, he was overly vocal about turning Christmas and Santa into a horror property, and here he is at times dressed as Santa killing people, collecting a very small check. Love me some holiday horror irony. Also interesting that he thought the Christmas stuff was sacred, but it was okay to be a Looney Tunes level stereotype of an Asian man in Breakfast at Tiffany's. You do you, Rooney. The movie starts with a boy named Derek, played by William Thorne, walking by his parents having sex and watching for an uncomfortable amount of time. Then he finds a present left to him on the porch and begins to open it.
Hey! What in God's name are you doing up at this hour?
His father scolds him and sends him to bed before opening the gift and finding a swift death by toy that also lands him eyeball first into a fire poker. The effects here, and really all through the movie, has to be commended for both the time of release and low budget. Looking up that it was Screaming Mad George makes sense, as SMG has had one hell of a career. William Thorne only made 4 appearances, with 2 others being on Demonic Toys and Bill and Ted's Bonus Journey. As a mostly mute performance, some of his expressions really sell both the absurdity of the movie and the fear the boy must be going through. 2 weeks pass, and we get Mom Sarah, played by Jane Higginson of Slaughterhouse fame, and Derek waking up and heading to the local toy store after a visit from the neighbor. That neighbor, Kim, is played by Neith Hunter, who was the star of Part 4 of this series and even has the same name while looking very similar. Is this a prequel, an alternate universe? Are we all trapped in a hell of vaguely repeating Christmas horror movies? Who's to say?
I mean, you would not believe the things that I've been through.
Clint Howard shows up doing the same damn thing, playing Ricky from Part 4 also. We get to the toy store, and oh boy is Mickey Rooney going through it. I actually think his performance is fun in a over-the-top ridiculous way. Then we get Pino. Wait, that came out wrong. We are introduced to Joe's son, Pino, which is obviously short for Pinocchio. With how weird and very dumb this movie is, it's not a far-fetched guess to assume that Pino isn't human and was instead made by Joe, but by the time we get there, it's even more absurd. Noah enters the store to some creepy music, and Derek and Sarah head out before Noah leaves with Larry the Larva, the 961st most popular gift on every kid's Christmas list in 1991. Pino is played by Brian Bremer, who does a wonderful job here, and is also in stuff like Pumpkinhead and Society while still making stuff today. Noah is played by Tracy Frame, who's also not in a ton. He's one of the leads here, but is unfortunately understated and overshadowed by the insanity of the rest of the cast, particularly Pedo and Pino. We then get a scene that is put in for 2 reasons: body count and to stretch this already slim hour and 25-minute movie. It's fun with whimsically menacing Christmas music and more practical effects shown off with yet more eye trauma for some reason.
This better be good.
Yeah, it's to die for.
The next section is what I refer to as the Lifetime movie section, with Pino sneaking into the house of Sarah and Derek, Noah dressing up as a mall Santa to see his son, and some light investigating into Pedo to confirm he accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, made toys that caused injury. Also, at the mall, we see one of the best, worst faces from Derek, who assumes something is wrong with Santa, as well as a little girl asking for a Bride of Reanimator VHS. VHS tapes were expensive in the early 90s, so good for her for shooting for the stars. We then get to learn that Pedo and Pino used to live in Sarah's house, like that's an excuse for him breaking back in. We also see another present that is put on the doorstep that ends up in the hands of Lonnie, who gets Back to the Future wannabe rocket booted right into the hospital. He is Kim's son, but that doesn't matter because none of this really matters. He and the not teenage teenagers are added for kill count, violence, and, with the couple at least, sex appeal. Noah and Sarah rekindle their relationship, where we officially learn of his parentage.
He's my son, isn't he?
Yes.
While Derek is babysat by the teen girl and her 35-year-old teen boyfriend. Derek apparently has a voyeur kink and ends up seeing these two get hot and heavy as well, but it doesn't last as more deranged than usual Joe comes into the house wearing a Santa suit and unleashes toys that he, the toy maker, has created. Joe does have a backstory, and it's that he created a bunch of messed up toys, but how they work we'll never know, that injured and maybe killed some kids. Some of these attacking toys he has unleashed seem pretty harmless, like the groping hand that looks right out of Christopher Lee's section of Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, but the others know how to ruin a good time. There are soldiers and a frickin' cannon who apparently shoot real bullets, and a tank that is part of the Guyver who saws and cuts his way through a very unlikable dude. The girl gets the worst of it here, though, as she takes way more punishment than a normal babysitter would. With the bloodiest distraction possible, Joe steals Derek by putting him in a sack like a cartoon character and takes him to the basement. The two adult heroes fight their way through the bottom 2 levels of the house.
Sarah!
With all the weapons and bots at his disposal, Joe sees fit to shoot Noah in the face with a squirt gun that is just filled with water, by the way. Although it's not Joe, as we find out, and his face is removed in favor of a Pino face. Pino's performance here is great and unhinged even before he turns into a Ken doll and tries to force himself on Sarah.
Oh my God.
Derek, Sarah, and Noah fight off Pino, who has killed Joe, and we get one of those endings where it's giving us sequel bait. A sequel that would never come.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
The series has been mostly dormant since this film, with a notable exception of the really dark 2012 remake, which is a blast. I say mostly dormant because the first two movies in this series seemingly get new Blu-ray and 4Ks pretty regularly from various physical media outlets. The other three have been lumped together, first with a bare-bones bad quality DVD, but later on a wonderful triple-pack Blu-ray from Vestron Video that is pretty loaded with special features. This movie is too short and too much fun to not be watched with the rest of the series. At least 3 to 5. While I'm here and we're finally finished with this series, I'll also throw out my ranking of the movies. For me, it goes 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, but they're all worth watching and add up to be the preeminent Christmas horror series. Silent Night, Deadly Night 5 is forgotten, dumb, and a blast. It should be wound up nearly every holiday season.
What in God's name are you doing up at this hour?
I eat kids like you for breakfast. That's why my shit smells so bad.
What an asshole.